And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man.
I'm a rocket man. I wanna go to the moon.
Shannon Breen needs no introduction in this industry, but what was your official title when you left Knight Swift?
SVP of Logistics, yeah.
And you oversaw like 2 or 3 different business units under
At
that,
one point,
intermodal, over the
intermodal
road.
logistics. Yeah, I had the intermodal division. That was my first real asset soiree, right? We had 12,000 containers, 550-ish trucks, lots of moving parts there, and then the entire logistics business for the combined brands of Knight Swift. So it was a big operation.
All right, so let's get into it real briefly. You left Knight Swift, you started FreightVana. That was in 2020 or 2021. I get the dates wrong.
I resigned in January of 21.
Okay.
We started FreightVana June 2nd of 21. So
Okay, any regrets so far? Because I mean, if you're just slinging freight, 2021, it got really easy for a bit. It was like, sweet, we just make money.
yeah, look, I guess that's the thing. No regrets on timing, right? I think a lot of people like, hey, would you wish you have started earlier? Zero regrets, because I just think you could live your whole life like that, right? Like me personally, you could live your life in the rear view. Like, well, what if you just I just spend all day looking in the rear view? I'm like, dude, I'm trying to go here. I don't have time to have those regrets. On a personal level, because it's funny, our real close friend and chairman actually asked me the other day, like, any regrets just in general, personally, professionally. And my only one is like, you really have to be willing to go through a certain level of sacrifice for your personally, but really for your family. When you think about completely resetting like your financial schema, you get used to living a certain way. You've worked hard to get to a certain place. You have certain things. You can take certain trips. When you make a bet like the one I did and you go all chips in, you have to really kind of reset almost back to when you were younger and you didn't have those things. And so the only regret personally I ever have, honestly, Gabe, is like, am I shortchanging, my family in any way on experiences or travel and certain things that, quite honestly, if I was still in a different place, I could do. But in this state, and you mentioned building a great business, which you can appreciate over the last 4 years, like it certainly hasn't come with that level of luxury by any.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue into. I kind of started it as a question of like, hey, the timing when you were in it, but the timing right now. So, for the audience sake, so it doesn't sound like you're just talking yourself up, because you aren't. But you started in 2021. FreightVana is now in the top 100. Would you call it logistics companies or the top 3PL,
Brokers,
brokers?
I'm a broker by MC, so top 100 brokerages.
And I do want to get into your business model, but I'm going to pivot to like this, the market now. There's really not very many people better than you to be like, what is going on in the market? You've got, I'll put it to you this way. You've got Ken Adamo and you got Craig Fuller, and you've got everybody in between. What's actually happening? You move the freight. Although both of those providers, DAT and Sonar, have high frequency data or data, whatever you want to argue about on FreightX. You move freight, and you move a lot of it if you're in the top 100. What's going on in the market? Give me a high level overview.
Yeah, I would say most unique time I've seen in my 15 years. So let's start there, right? I think if I fully knew where I was at, I'd be doing something else. Probably not hear you, but I would say what I'm seeing is very, very unique. I think all the things to be true. I still, from my financial background in mind, am saying, okay, the economic fundamentals, right? Now, people say freight's ripping and all the things, but I'm not seeing that in the housing stats. Certainly not seeing it in the employment stats. I think other two concerning financial stats would be, like I said, you've got your home foreclosure statistics, which are starting to continue to escalate, and then the one that led even those was the auto foreclosures, right? So none of those are pointing towards healthy economies, and yet we are ripping in the freight economy. I think everybody. I was at conferences for three different conferences in the first quarter, and I think most of the shippers were kind of still talking about like, hey, flat is their goal. Well, naturally, like, who wants to pay more for the same thing? Like, you personally, like, hey, like, you want to go do this thing and
Yeah.
pay more for it? Like, you've been paying for this for 3 years, but how about you pay more? Like, no, I don't really think I want to pay more. Well, no one wants to pay more, right? And
Right.
they've got their reasons. They've got their economists. They've got their strategic planning. They've got their budgets. They also don't have strong commercial plans, right? Like, they don't have plans that are like, oh, well, what's your growth pattern for X retailer? This, like, I always tell people I've got less than 10% of the hundreds of shippers I work with that are super bullish when you walked into 26 on their own commercial plans, right? As a company, like, hey, we're going to grow X percent, which is saying something. Most people are like, man, our kind of goal, there's a lot of disruption. We want to be flat. So you're hearing
we don't want to we don't want to be down.
Well, you can't go back, right? Publicly traded culture, like literally, you hell or high water, like the thing you hold on to the most is we only go somewhere up and to the right, but going backwards is really highly,
so long as humans involved, like, it's not going to work. But
yeah, just doesn't sell well to the street, to anybody. So no one wants to go back. So they sell flat. They want to be at flat. I think everybody now realizes 1 quarter into transportation, which you asked about, like, being flat compared to last year there's pretty much almost impossible. I think there will also be maybe less than 5% of folks, depending on how you're positioned, your market, the relationships you have. I still would question all of that to say, like, I don't think anybody's keeping a flat year-over-year budget from 25 to 26 if you look at their transportation costs.
Now, I do think that there's some shippers that, whether it was luck or they had the right partner at the time, whatever it was, like, if they did an RFP last fall into winter, they haven't seen the increases yet because it's new freight for some of the carriers. They might see that routing guide start to crack now, but there's people who didn't, and they launched an RFP in Q1, or they launched it recently, and they're saying, hey, actually, we're going to pull ahead the award to, like, right now. Are you ready? Do you want to just start shipping it? And you're seeing, and I get to see this from an interesting perspective, not as a broker, as like a managed trans, and I see all the brokers kind of come back and say, hey, we don't want this lane. Here's our new price. And some of them say, hey, we'll keep it, and we're bleeding, but we'll bleed to be able to get the new business. It's a whole dynamic. But I wanted to break something down, like, tactically. Fuel is what everybody's talking about. And I'm not the subject matter expert. I just act like I am sometimes. Fuel helps who? Not brokers, right? Like, brokers aren't like, sick, fuel's ripping, I'm going to make so much more money. So that's kind of a weird dynamic happening at the same time as capacity tightens, fuel's going up. But isn't that only good for the carriers who have, like, line haul plus fuel in their contract? Now they're getting paid more.
Yeah. So think about, it's a great call out, right? If you're like working on all-in contracts, you're getting crushed, right? And
on a broker side,
on the broker side for sure. And everybody's got, not everybody, but everybody has usually some pieces of business that they have some sort of all in. So you're scrambling to get those right sized, for sure. The carriers feel it in the lag because they have to pay at the pump, and those prices change very quick.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a lag on what they get paid.
30 days, 60 days. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one that I find really interesting, and this is a unique spot in my decade and a half career, is, you got these, like, you got Breakthrough Fuel, which does their program, and obviously that's like a mark to market and seems pretty agile. But you have some folks like on a national pad, right? So let's talk about, if I'm on a national pad and I'm paying, let's say at one point it's moved so fast, so I'll just throw a number, 65 cents a mile, which is still wild compared to what we were talking about a year ago. But anyway, let's say it was 65 cents a mile that we pay on the national pad. Well, the problem is that national pad, if it's built that way, it has to cover California. Well, the problem is all the truckers sitting in California are like, that's awesome. I don't really care what your national pad is, like, and whatever you built in, like, I'm going to the pump and it costs a fortune to fill up. So now the carriers, you're seeing, especially over the last 2 weeks, a lot of pushback on, like, this is what I need to cover my fuel costs. And if I can't get that, there's going to be somebody else that will cover that. And so that's where you're seeing a lot of this churn and disruption, because even these national pads haven't kept up with that velocity that fuel changed so quickly in the last few weeks on us. So that's an interesting topic that you really have to ask for, like, accessorial on, like, hey, I need help on fuel, which is like something you really never
supplement accessorial, not just And the final
never
mile
asked
world,
for that in my career. Yeah.
Right. I'm pretty, like, we have a lot of exposure, a lot of business in the final mile sector, and that's like, a lot of it is like 26-foot pup trucks, straight trucks, whatever you call them. and they're hurting on fuel too, because they might, like, a lot of the contracts for final mile are like a rate per stop for fuel,
Mhm.
but it starts at like $1, goes up to like $1.85, $2.85. And even when it's at $7 for diesel, like, sure, they're now getting like $4, but that's just not gonna cut it. And they might be running a 180-mile route round trip in a day. It's not over the road trucking, but their truck, they're out of El Monte, or they're out of Ontario. They're getting crushed by fuel, and they don't have a big fleet to buy for them. And so fuel is interesting. So to dig deeper into, there's fuel going on, but that's really a war surcharge at the moment. Quasi war, whatever it is right now. I don't think anybody knows what it is. I know we're bombing a bunch of Iran, and they're saying that we stopped, and now Israel did. It's kind of crazy. So I think people speculated maybe that'll be quick and it'll just be a field jump and it'll go back down. That was happening at the same time as what everybody's talking about, like the capacity leaving the market, the non-domiciled CDLs, the narrative of like there's no truck driver shortage, but there is actually like fewer truckers on the road because Secretary Duffy said, hey, we're going to start enforcing the rule that's always been on the books. And they started to, and whether that was going to affect rates at the rate they are now or not, that plus fuel is kind of like the weirdest thing ever. Because
with no demand. Now,
well, yeah, the demand, COVID was easy to understand. At least like people who aren't in freight, they're like, oh, we bought a bunch of stuff and everybody had to ship and there wasn't enough people to ship it. And so the rates are higher. It's pretty hard to tell somebody who's not in freight now, like, oh, the rates are higher. They're like, well, the economy's kind of weird. Housing is weird, like you said. So are you sure the rates are higher? And it's like, this is a weird, not melt up, but now it's actually a weird surge. I don't know what to think of it. And I don't know how long it'll last. But if there was a demand uptick all of a sudden, that would kind of go crazy. But it's easier to understand that.
The demand uptick would, but like, and I always talk about this in my time, right? In the sport of transportation. Like the first quarter is always the worst quarter.
Yep.
Like that's not a new thing. Like the only quarter that the first quarter was ever really booming was legitimately COVID, which you referenced, right, Gabe?
Yeah.
So what's also inquisitive there is like we're only in March. Now, if you go back to end of December and January, it felt the opposite. It felt like, wow, where's the world heading? Like, are we in the full blown? Like, there wasn't a lot of volumes. A lot of people were hurting. You weren't seeing the throughput. Like, it was like, and that's still first quarter, but it felt worse than any other first quarter. To be sitting here talking with you 60 days later and being like, it's ripping. I'm like, I literally don't know what environment you and I are working in. And look, to be honest, we're not the only ones. The shippers have no clue. The finance teams, the procurement teams,
yeah,
they have no luxury of timing. They're trying to do it. They're trying to save. They're trying to service. It's a very, very, I'd say tenuous, but it's just all over the place. It's all over the place right now. It's hard to peg.
So it's actually, we do so much in e-commerce that this happened in LTL and e-commerce in like 2023, 2022. They had huge, or 2022, every e-commerce company could list any product and it would just sell. And it was like, hey, the container ships are now arriving on time, so we're making money. They were even pulling inventory out forward, and like e-commerce brands that were drop shippers were suddenly like, we need to store some of this and just keep selling it. The rates in LTL just continued to go up from 21 to 22 to 23 to 24. Overlength charges, every little nitpicky accessorial. Oh, that's a hotel. Now it's a mini storage facility. Overlength was 8 feet. Now it's 10 feet. Now it's every 12 inches. It's a different $50 increase up to 20 feet. Customers who were shipping 20-foot, panels and pergolas, they're like, we just won't ship it at all. And then the spigot turned off in e-commerce in 2023, but the rates did not go down. So they actually had a very similar scenario where it's like, hey, our sales are down and our freight costs are up. That's a real bad problem because we give free shipping. We already were losing money. And you saw a whole wave of VC money like have to either do another round, or companies were just disappearing. Right now, those companies are getting acquired by a couple of mega brands I won't mention, but they're just buying every furniture company in their marketplace and just pennies on the dollar. So now, fast forward, you have the truckload market doing that. It's the first time I've seen the truckload market do that, where it's like, well, when demand goes up, supply, all that, like it has to catch up. There's rates increased. Demand is not up. And in fact, I have a lot of clients that are in, major retailers now. We were in e-com, now we're in retail, both. the major retail clients are like, we're down year over year, unit count, sales count, we're driving sales. Freight costs are going to go up. Why? And it's my job and your job and other people's job like us to be like, here's why. And my best answer right now is I'll keep you updated every week.
I mean, we can unpack it here if you want. I think it's something I've been working on, something I'm going to talk a little bit more about on my channels next week, but let's unpack it here. I've actually got this thought that, so I started thinking about, everybody talks about, right, you mentioned Craig, and it's a lot of, and I love like what both those guys do, because I think like having the opinions and the passion, how they bring it, and the data, I'm obsessed with it, just kind of like you are, and I like being.
I follow along.
Yeah, I do too. I'm a player. I'm a player in the game, right? Yep. At least I'm on the field. So I've got this thought that I've been unpacking, and it kind of is this thought of like the why, and this kind of takes me back to my like old trucking days, working inside one of the largest publicly traded trucking companies in America. And I follow the financials of the companies. I know you do too, right? You're a student of the sport in that way as well. Yep. One of the things that's really stuck out to me, we always talk about, oh, well, this is what spot rate's doing. Spot rates year over year, but like think about what really moves the bulk of the market. It's not spot.
Yeah, it's contract. Yeah,
it's contract, right? So I've got this chart. I'll share it. Then ping you next week, and this will probably be out, and we'll be doing our thing. But I got this thought. So if you look at 2017, right? So let's not go COVID, because everybody like, well, what happened in COVID? I'm like, let's go before COVID, right? Let's actually go to 2017, and let's pretend that was the baseline, right? And then what I basically have been kind of putting together is, okay, let's get driver wages, equipment, insurance, maintenance, right? Let's assume those are the big bulky items.
To operate a truck besides fuel.
Yeah. And then so you got all the different ranges of what those inflationary numbers could be, but like every single one has had, certainly if you take a line from 17 to where you and I sit in the year 2026, like every one of those has had sequential gains. And if you take the net weighted average of all four of those, I intuited the data would show something around like a weighted average of 3.5% increase every year, right? Now, if you do the same thing
year,
3.5%, right? Because it's inflationary, and you have to weight all of those pieces, because which one of those four pieces went down at any time? Like you run a company, and when's insurance going down for you? When's the wages and benefits going down for you, Gabe? Like, and if you find that trick, by all means, like you got
I'll
myself.
DM you, yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk offline. But either way, equipment, right? You talk about going through COVID and after, like all of these things have like, that's a 3.5% line that runs away. Well, if you started with what trucking contract rates were, right? Mm-hmm. Just at that point in time, and you said, okay, if you're in trucking in 2017, now map out what have trucking contract rates done. You'll see them go up, right? You'll see 18 at bump, then down. Then of course you get to COVID, and there's this massive run. And guess what? That massive run gets close to where that inflationary line should have been in the year 21. Oh. But then what happens? Boom, boom. We're cascading away. But that line, that cost
doesn't cascade.
It doesn't cascade. It doesn't even blip, right? It's just all the things telling you it's more and more expensive. So a good group to follow that I really love their work is like ATRI, right? Because they consolidate. They're a nonprofit. They get data from the big trucking companies, the Werner, the Fed, like all of them, and they all over the map, and they produce data. So they I think would concur with some of these stats. But like the cost of trucking obviously continues to accelerate. Well, contract rates, if you map that out for that cycle, right, Gabe, and you sit where we sit 9 years later, there's like a 22 to 26% delta of what it takes. And so it's like you see where the pain is, right? Every week we see on a channel or up, someone's going out of business. Well, that's it. How do you outwork that type of delta when you're 22 to 26% behind what it is? And I think you could easily see that in the big, because we're like, oh, well, that's a small trucker problem. Like they're not disciplined and they don't have buying power. Oh yeah? Like go check out, maybe don't want to throw their names out, just like you didn't throw some names, but there's a couple really established large trucking companies that haven't made much, if not any money, and some have lost money literally for 6-8 quarters in a row.
Yeah.
And they have all the purchasing power of insurance. They have all
and
the
fuel and all of the other things. Yeah.
All all the things. They get the economies of scale, and they can't produce it anymore. So imagine the mid-sized trucker. Imagine this. So we baking all this to say, and part of what I'm sharing with you and we're unpacking here is the why. What if it's just this 8-9 years of pent-up demand where there's literally nowhere else to go for a trucker other than to get paid more, and those who survive are just having to get paid more, otherwise there's no way through it, right? So yes, it's a capacity thing, but it's almost like a pent-up trucker dilemma that just has to right size. Today is maybe the start of that. So yes, the shipper doesn't have it, they didn't want to have it, but guess what, like, truckers have to survive. They have to refresh their equipment. That's another one you and I, like, we talked about equipment, but what happened for the last 4 years? How many people you think were on hyper and refresh cycles?
Nobody bought anything. You can look at the data on that. Yeah.
And data. So at some point you got to buy new trucks. At some point you have to close that 20-something% gap. And if I was prognosticating and guessing, regardless of what the macroeconomics do over the next two couple cycles, you'd have to be a betting person to say that that contract rate has to get closer to the cost to serve than further away. Otherwise, I don't know who's operating trucks in the years 2027 and 2028. And it'd be my guess that over the next couple of years, you're going to see it close the gap, 15-20% increase in contract rates, just because it has to, for refresh rates and all the reasons that I kind of just unpacked with you there.
All right. So two things come to mind. One, that was an awesome unpacking. You've thought about that. Now, whenever we do release this, I'll release all the graphics that you have if you're ready for them too. That'd be awesome to share. So two things come to mind. One, as you were saying it and walking it through, the only thing I kept thinking was, okay, I get why non-domiciled CDLs exploded. And over like foreign dispatchers and non-domiciled CDLs and Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Like, I get it. And it's almost like that was a Band-Aid the whole time.
The whole time.
But here's my hot take. Or if I'm the Trump administration and I've got Secretary Duffy out there just banging on doors saying, hey, get him out, stop it, stop this. At what point do they say, oh, actually, maybe we actually shouldn't, maybe we need that. And there's going to be some interesting across party lines political play there that's like, oh, people are getting wrecked. Maybe we need to have foreign labor again.
So your hot take is in line with my two of the closing story. I told this on the other. My first one is the irony of cleaning up America trucking, which one I fundamentally agree with. Mm-hmm. I think having an industry without standards, having an industry without safety is not an industry that, I want my family driving down the road, not the one that I want yours in. And look, there's going to be accidents, like that's what happens. But I think it's our duty as professionals to want that. So I think Duffy and them wanting that is fine. The actual irony is, though, to your point, if the cost to serve of trucking follows the pattern that I just said, regardless of the macroeconomic growth, and trucking now has to charge, right? Transportation and trucking and logistics cost 15% more. It's actually hyper freaking inflationary, right?
Like without getting into politics, Trump administration's main, they were banging the drum. I was going to say the war drum, but that would have been out of place because I wasn't talking about that. They're banging the drum on reshoring, manufacturing, the cost to ship lumber, steel, plastics, AI chips, all of that. If that runs away and we're also ripping out the artificial supply, you're going to have some big capitalist executives saying, hey, it doesn't make sense. I have to buy it from China because I can 100%. Get it to the port. And then, my cost of goods, I have to pull a lever for me. And then it's like, what do? They're doing the right thing. I actually completely wholeheartedly agree with Secretary Duffy and the whole movement. And a caveat, anybody can get in an accident for any reason. Doesn't matter where you're born and where you live, or if you're an immigrant here on a visa, whatever it is. But in America, we have this thing where it's like, hey, if an accident happens, we like to look back at it and say, why did it happen? And if you can point more than one time to they didn't have a CDL or they didn't have the right training, then it's like, well, You have to just say, okay, no more of that. Because it's just one time, right? Well, it's one family. So you have to take that. That's an American principle. Like, you do things the right way. But if they rip out the artificial supply, which is the truckers who will, whether it's crass to say it or not, they'll do it for less. They can live on less. They can do it for
They'll
less.
undercut the standards.
Yeah, and then they undercut standards. They cut corners, whatever it is, to do it cheaper. And then don't even get me into like the Uzbekistan dispatching like ring. If you actually take that out and you're reshoring and you've got an Iran war and a Ukraine war, like that's a perfect storm for the cost of trucking is going to rise and people won't want to pay the prices.
100%.
If the consumers can't meet the demand, and then like we got rid of inflation, I thought, right? Here we go.
Yeah, I think that your hot take, and you touched on something which I love that you just hit it, because it was kind of my other big one. When you roll it forward multiple cycles, not only do I think it's hyperinflationary, but I don't know where that lands, because I'm like you, like we do what we do. That's not what I'd be getting paid to do other things once again. But I think the most ironical thing is, I think the actual solution multi years from now will actually be a narrative that sounds like, hey, we need more immigrant labor joining our transportation and logistics and driving jobs in America. Now, my hope is that it's under better standards, better training.
Yeah, the golden door, open it wide open, and say,
"Come." But we are gonna get back to the irony of it all is, I think it's going to be inflationary, and then the solution will actually be folks coming into this country that we look to drive trucks, because I think from a cost perspective, that will be probably the best solution. Like I said, albeit under better standards. But I think if you think about, to your point, the administration, and not to be political, this is like both of those things couldn't be farther from the line
objective. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, but I think that's going to be an irony that we both live out. Your hot take is probably very, very, very similar to the one that I have, just in my mind.
I just came up with it because of the data you laid out, and I'm glad I came to a similar conclusion. I'm like, what are they going to do with that? Because people will say, and I said it myself earlier, I was like, taking politics out of it. Well, if you're in this industry, politics play a part. And if like the politics is reduce immigration and enforce non-domiciled CDLs, and that's actually a political play more than even a policy play, because there's already a rule and they're just saying, no, we're going to do the right thing and enforce it. How are they going to make the pivot to, yeah, but now once, let's say, I'm from Fargo, so I just say things like, once we deport you, please come back and do it for the same rate. Just come back this way, and please, and hopefully, maybe it's a good segue here. The other
let me hit one more, though. I think you'll find this one interesting, because you're already seeing this in the truckers. Like, they're not able to seat their trucks. Even the big truckers, I talked to many of them, don't have the class sizes to replenish their fleet and have trucks on the road. Okay. So just to finish this topic, you literally have very successful truckers that have withstood the storm, that have trucks sitting against the fence that need a certain level of people coming into the class, but because they don't have the class, they can't fill the trucks. So those trucks are sitting. Then the question is, so then tell me, Gabe, well, how would you fill the truck, Shannon? Like, you got to fill trucks. How would you fill a truck? Well, we're going to pay them more. Oh, so you're going to pay drivers more. So once again, where is this going? And then you need to charge more and you need to pay more. So like, this all still sounds hyperinflationary, because the next person that you need to go fill the truck isn't doing it for the price of if the pay was the issue and the standards were the issue, your trucks would be full. Well, the answer, how trucking companies do it, is they have to put pay and specialty pay and bonus pack so they start paying more, which means they need to charge more. So that cycle only flows one way, the one we're heading to.
And this is off topic, but the same thing would be like, if you talked earlier about housing, and it's like, okay, so I brought up lumber and steel, and I brought up that about reshoring, and it maybe wasn't actually the right analogy because we already have those here, although we still import a lot. So maybe they would say, okay, well, we're not importing, so we're manufacturing, and now our cost of goods is lower because we're here, and then, we can have more over the road, transportation cost. But it doesn't really matter, because in order for the housing market to recover, interest rates have to go down. You can't have hyperinflationary. So you have to get interest rates down, and they're trying. And then you have to be able to afford to build a new house, because there's not enough houses. So if it's more expensive to build a new house than to buy somebody else's, but their mortgage rate's at 2% and they're never moving, good luck. I'm glad I don't have to do that. I'm just gonna, do
Stay
middle
where you're
mile,
at.
final mile home delivery and just kind of stay in my
Yeah.
lane. But I'll talk
But
about it.
but that's why they talked about the remortgages. I can't remember the exact term, right? Being able to keep your mortgage. I guess there's some place. My wife's a mortgage professional.
Yeah, I tried to do that when I moved the first time. I was like, "Is it an
Portable mortgages. Portable mortgage.
assumable mortgage or something like that? Can we assume
Yeah.
your mortgage rate?" Because we built a house and it was like, "Oh, now it's 6.5%," and I was like, "Well, that was stupid." But
Yeah.
I'll
This
figure
is
it out.
different. Like you apport it. In Europe, you actually keep it, right? And I don't
Yeah.
know all the mechanics, but that's like you remember like 4 months ago. That's to your point. That's exactly why they're talking about it because they're like, who's trading from 2.5, 2.8,
To
2.9
6.5. It's
to
still
six and a
six
half?
and a
Like
half.
no one, like no one, like unless you have to, like unless you're really successful and can build a new house,
Yeah,
like
but then
Dave,
you can't do
but
that. That's not accessible to enough. And so it's like,
yeah.
okay. So going back to how do we reduce the cost of trucking without the artificial supply? The other argument is, well, AI is going to do that and we're going to have EVs driving themselves. I think that if I'm the Trump administration or the next presidential administration is likely going to have to deal with that more than this one.
Hmm.
They would I think that EVs and autonomous trucking will eventually be like a real huge part of over the road trucking. I think about it more in LTL, and people will throw stones at me for that, but like LTL is more predictable. It's overnight line hauls from one terminal to the next, and it's the same route, and they always do them overnight, and you have to pay the drivers more, and it's a driver will still be in the vehicle, but it's overnight. I think that that'll take effect, but it'll take too long. If this super cycle, or I guess whatever we're calling it, like if there's 2 or 3 cycles, it will be too late. And you can't just be like, well, the robots will do it. So I would bet that any administration, whether it's Biden, Trump, or the next one, they're going to do anything they can to keep the costs lower until that. And then maybe that's like their end goal. And I don't know if you saw Trump named like a new science and technology board this last week.
Did not.
Yeah, it's like, so David Sachs was the AI and crypto czar. And then like when you have a special government employee, they get 130 total days to work. That's it for the 4-year term. He did his 130th day. So they named him the chair of the Science and Technology Advisor Board. There's 13 people. 12 of them are the technology AI company leaders. Zuckerberg and Andreessen and Sachs and all of them. So obviously they're like, hey, we're betting on this group figuring out, because this board is supposed to figure out things like this. It's like, hey, how do we get AI to everybody? How do we get robots to everybody, do it safely? Manufacturing, the AI data centers. If 12 of the 13 are out of Silicon Valley, you can kind of know where they're going to try to policy right towards that
Yeah.
direction. It's going to take way too long. Now, you could listen to another episode of this, and if the audience has seen any other episodes, I'm always like, AI is here, and I'm talking about like running a brokerage, running a company, all that. That's already here with Claude and others. But autonomous trucking is a different animal. There's like regulations. You can't just have a company just be like, I'm just going to start doing this. There's no Vumas or Happy Robots in that space. Like they are there, but they will never get the regulatory approvals to just be like, yep, Walmart's just going to put their stuff on the truck and just ship it with no human.
Yeah, social. You got to have the approvals, the regulations are a big key. I think one of the things that going back to my time and working for a large trucking company, and one of the commentary would consistently sound like, well, that plane that you just got into can fly itself too, right? Like most of the planes actually do, but there's 2 pilots. Why? Well, in case something goes bad, you're like, oh, but why though? I mean, that the robot's smarter, it knows the route, it could handle the stuff. Like
to make us
that
feel
plane,
better. Yeah.
right? But like, there's 2 pilots, not just one. There's usually 2, and bigger planes, obviously more than that. But why, right? So they got the jobs, the protection, if something goes wrong. And so, you mentioned, I still feel like there'll be someone in the cab for a while,
for a long time. But I don't want to interrupt you, but my ADD sometimes just does this.
Yeah,
so
you can. It's your show.
We can do. There's always going to be a driver in the cab for a long, long time. But I think, I don't know if Elon has said this or whoever it was. I saw a clip. You have to redo the infrastructure in America. You have to create, if you wanted to do this, you'd create a highway for autonomous trucks, and there wouldn't be other people using that, and then there wouldn't be semis on the road, and then suddenly there's less traffic. But you'd have to create new infrastructure, and I think that that's what'll end up happening, just like the railroad the first time. It'll be like, hey,
like a separate lane? I mean, they wouldn't create, right?
Yeah, it would be like
Like
going in the same
own
direction, but it
HOV
would be
lane.
like another median in between, and it would just be like, hey, this is the autonomous semis, and they just drive there, and they're not next to you. And then it frees up all the traffic on the normal roads, and like that's probably where it goes. And then people are less like driving by and going, there's no driver in that. And then, but I mean, the data on self-driving vehicles in cars with Waymo and Tesla is like way safer than humans driving. How many
Probably
drunk
have 10
driving
out my
accidents?
window here. I have like 10
Yeah,
out my window here. Like
yeah.
Phoenix is like a hotbed, man. Especially like Central Phoenix, where I'm standing right now. Like, I mean,
Waymo.
one of the thing, everybody comes to the office and they all get out the app, and sometimes it's pretty cool actually, because it's like people's first experience in it. And
Yeah.
so we kind of we play it up. But yeah, they run all over. I mean, you look out my window, I probably see 6 of them.
All right, so we've talked about the market, talked about fuel, we talked about autonomous trucking, and we talked about immigration and fuel in the Iran war. So we've covered quite a bit. I'm going to go back
You in
to
Washington next week.
Yeah, we're going to figure this out. Why aren't we on a board?
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to, so you said that, when you started FreightVana, like I asked you if there's any regrets, et cetera, and like the timing. But one of the things you talked about was like, hey, I did have to sacrifice some, I'll call it lifestyle, but it's really like you don't mind that and I don't mind that nearly as much as I'm like, oh, my wife and kids. And, I'm 5.5, almost 6 years into this. And the last 2 years, I can do the things that I want to do. And it's been pretty good. And it's still super hard to run a business. But I was a sales rep making way more money than I was making the last 4 years, just being a sales rep. And I didn't have any other responsibility. And I just said, hey, here's our new lifestyle. So how many kids do you have?
5, 3 older stepkids and 2 young ones, 8 and 11, about to be 9 and 12. Yeah.
So you got 2 young ones or 3 young ones, you said?
Two little ones, 8 and 11 right now.
8 and 11. Yeah. So during COVID, they were 4 or 5 or 3.
Yeah, when I quit, they were 3 and 5 when I quit.
Yeah, 3 and 5. Smart. It's always the best choice. Just go for it. And then you talked about, why you did that. What were the 3 C's you talked about, just to kind of bring them up here? Why would you leave Night Swift, and you were part of the whole merger? You were like, hey, I'm helping put this whole thing together. And then you're just kind of king of the castle in whatever you were doing. You're like, hey, I did it. Why'd you leave? Why'd you start your own company?
Yeah, it was. I framed it for you. I think we one of the times we met and discussed, but the 3 C's for me were COVID. We talked about that ad nauseam. I think everybody kind of rethought their life and different things. People were, just a really odd time to kind of sit back. So that was COVID. The other C would be cancer, right? A lot of people obviously feeling that, and they're, direct families, extended families. So my father got it. I watched him go through it. He's still battling it today. Like most young boys that grow up, your dad's kind of your superhero, and so got a chance to kind of see through that lens, and it was sobering. My dad taught school, had sacrificed a lot of his entrepreneurial ambitions throughout his life, and my mom, both elementary school teachers, gave a ton back. We didn't have a lot, but like he always made the sacrifices and didn't chase the dream. So I felt like it was a little bit of an ode to him.
Yeah.
Right. To do it, and was like, heck, I've had this burning ambition. And the last one that kind of led me was like corporate culture, right? I think working inside a large publicly traded company, we talked about it. It's for some. At some point, it almost feels like you don't fit in.
Especially when you have the qualities of an entrepreneur, and I always use that term loosely. A lot of people equate entrepreneur with solo entrepreneur, like, hey, run an agency and stuff. That's a different type of person. The person who runs a company is the one that's like, I'm not going to make money for 5 years, and it might not work, and I might lose everything. But if you're doing that and you're working at a large corporation, you don't fit in very well.
Yeah. And so I kind of just felt like it was going to be that for me, and was kind of heading that direction. And so I think the amalgamation of those 3, Gabe, kind of led me to be like, you know what, like, I'm going to go do this thing. I'll tell you a really cool story too. A lot of people, they look at, I don't know your leap story. Everybody's got a leap story or a reason or something that happened. But, for me, I decided to quit on early January. And the coolest thing probably happened to me, because, when you quit, you mentioned the 3 and 5 year old, and like, we didn't have any capital and we didn't have the business set up. And like, we're truly parachuting, right? Like you're betting on yourself. It's the ultimate bet, which,
and no matter what, you have money saved up and it will not be enough. And you think in your head, you're like, oh, I have enough and I got to long enough time domain to make this work. It never is. So
No, absolutely not. But I think the coolest thing happened to me, and it was really a testament, hopefully, for how I've shown up for the industry, shown up for other people. So I quit, and while I'm trying to figure out the journey that is FreightVana, I get multiple phone calls from people throughout the industry being like, "What are you doing? Like, hey, don't do that. Like, why don't you come work with us? Why don't you come work for me? Like, I think you could do great things here." And I was like honored and humbled by it, right? But like really quickly, it changed my framework. I was like, wait, hold on, this isn't like an abyss. I don't fall off the earth. Like, I'm gonna go chase this dreams for all the reasons I shared with you. But if something happens, guess what? Like, I know what I'm doing. I can provide value. I've grown before, and there's other organizations that would love to have me. And so I've really always super appreciative of some of those people that kind of went out of their way. It wasn't like I didn't have the, the green banner and wasn't seeking a job, obviously.
yeah.
So for them to just reach out and kind of instill that confidence, like they were trying to reach out to, see if I could join their team and create value, which that's their job. And I loved it. But for me, it was like this confidence boost. Like, wait, hold on. Like, let's go even harder at this thing, because like the back end is like, I maybe gotta, find a different path or go work for a different organization. And so that's kind of how I got here. And, 5-6 months later, we hired a pretty healthy sized team and did our first load in August of 21, and just been living this kind of like differentiated dream. A lot about our trailers and what we've done throughout the network, and adding those throughout all the areas of the country. And I don't know, man, it's just been this really cool opportunity to bet on myself, try to change.
It's been super easy the whole time, smooth sailing, never any
adversity.
So
yeah, no, I know, but I just posted something today. Like, this guy's like, hey, it's always uphill. Like, it's always uphill. And so you just get to choose your hill. And
I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah, it is. Like, look at the thing I put out today. It's like, it truly is. It's always uphill, and that's where you learn. And so you just get to choose which hills you want to climb. And I'm super proud of myself for making the leap, because like the regrets would have been much more painful than what we've gone through over the last 4 years.
Agreed. I'm going to ask you some tough, hard-hitting questions in a second, but you said you get to choose your hill. I just said something similar to my internal team. Our leadership was meeting, and we were having some pretty, I'll call them problems, issues, but they were related to bringing on too many customers and like trying to figure out how to onboard them the right way, and making sure that as we grow, like every customer still gets the experience that Rocket normally created. And we had some gaps, and we got some feedback from some of our enterprise clients. They're like, hey, your team isn't doing what we are accustomed to. And I was like, well, shoot, it appears we're focusing too much on bringing on new clients, and there's always a balance. And me and the leadership group were meeting, and we're like, man, this is still hard, even though we're like, this is our most successful year, and last year was our best year, and the year before that was our worst year. And it's like, hey, and I said something similar, but I like yours better, the hill. I was like, well, turns out we're always going to have to solve problems. I would much rather solve a problem of too many customers and how to onboard them and how to scale without adding OpEx than 2023, which was, how do I pay everybody and make this thing keep going, because our customers didn't pay us. And so I was like, it's always going to choose your hill, but it's never smooth sailing, ever, because you grow too fast, you grow too slow. It's always hard.
Yeah. So I like that you're embracing the hill aspect of it. I've got a couple of emails myself with some folks, right? We talk about the market and the chaos in California and this, and it's like, hopefully you've built up enough credibility where people know you care, right? And like, you got to kind of like dig in and solve some problems at the same time we too are growing. And so it's a natural part of that growth curve. I think at the end of the day, people want to know, I'll use a professional term, you give a shit.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing. And so we show up with a good team, and, we're not infallible. We make mistakes and do all the things that you're mentioning in some of your team. But I think that's important, because I think those are the growth moments, and you can never rest on your laurels. I also told people, like, that's something that big companies often do. They rest on their laurels, right? So as small growth companies, I give this analogy to someone the other day. It's like, if we had baseball cards, no one cares what you batted in 2024
at all.
Like, really, like all professional sports. It's why we all, for those of us that follow sports, it's a purity to the fact that, like, that's cool, dude. You did that in 25, but what are you doing in 26? Like, it's always, what did you do? What What did you do? What's the last load you did? What's the last onboarding you did? No one really cares. And so that should keep you sharp as a pro. Hey, look, the best athletes in the world have to live on that dime.
Yep.
Right. And so I think if we want to perform, companies like yours, companies like mine, we want to perform at that level of professionalism, you're going to have a bad season. You're going to have a bad couple at bats. You're
Right.
going to struggle. But guess what? Like, you're there for a reason, and like you'll dig yourself out of it, but it's not infallible. It's not, you're not just, oh, we start a new year, I'm just going to bat 320. No, you have to put in tons of work to maintain. Tons.
Yeah, and
More
churn
than
is like the one thing that kills every company. And if they can't keep like, and I will say the big companies you talked about resting on their laurels, I always say it as like they do their best to stand still. Like they just think as long as we stay where we're at, we're fine. But if you're standing still as a growth company, you're moving backwards because you're just one day away from churn, and then you never expect it, and now you don't have enough pipeline, etc. But the big companies always just say, well, let's just keep it steady.
Yeah,
Growth
but you know how
companies
they
can't do that.
yeah, you know what they rest on for growth? Acquisition.
Yeah, inorganic. Which speaking of which, you talked about acquisition, but I wanted to, the hard hitting questions are, you talked about corporate culture, and then earlier in the call, I don't know if we had started recording, but you said you know when you first started, you raised a bunch of money and then you hired 24 dozen people in a day, whatever that number is, of 100 people. I don't know. How did you? And this is a tough like ask for anybody, but how did you hire so many people and then immediately be like, but we can't have corporate culture? Because like the thrill of a startup is like you and your buddies, and that's like one way to do it. I think that yours isn't also an epic way to do it. But how do you then go, okay, we're going to be big right away, or rather big compared to a startup, and then not have corporate culture? How did you do it?
To me, 22, 23, 24 wasn't big because I gave you the sense of like I'm just leaving a place that's got like tens of
Exactly.
thousands of employees. So to me, 22 felt like buddies, right? So
Yeah, you hired
start
what you
there,
thought
right?
you'd need, and then you grew into it.
Oh, if I was a solopreneur and we had 22, I'd be like, oh dear God, what did we just do, right? So maybe give perspective, right? Because I think perspective is power. Like that for me, it didn't feel that way, and so I felt like we have a really tight nucleus, hand-selected folks, people that believed in obviously myself, um, people that believed in what we were going to build here. I mean, the really interesting part is imagine like those people walking into a place, our first day and having no TMS, no revenue, no customers, no carriers, no credit, no nothing. Right now, imagine the shock. Now, I had months to
Conversation. Yeah.
desensitize. Well, I had combos, but I had months personally to desensitize from that world of like go, 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 go. I had 5 months of different things, right? Raising dollars, setting up businesses, like
Oh yeah, the
figuring
fun
out where
stuff.
we're gonna have an office, like just weird stuff, right? So I was there, but like to watch these folks in those first couple months was quite entertaining. We often laugh about it around here because it was like, but we have no loads. He was like, I know, isn't that weird? like we have a
If
company,
you
but we
hired
don't
freight
have
pros,
any.
if you
We
hired
don't
people
have
from
any
the
freight,
industry, they're like, I have one mode. It is go.
right? I mean, there was like it literally you could see him like just not comfortable, and that was kind of fun. And we quickly worked our way out of that, and obviously have different problems as we sit here, 4.5, damn near 5 years later, which is a blessing. But
June
it's
2nd, right? June 2nd will
June
be
2nd,
5 years.
yeah,
It's my wife's
coming up.
birthday. I'll remember that. So
My sister's
I'll wish you a happy birthday on that for your company. But now let me rephrase it or reframe it. So you started relatively small, actually, compared to what you're used to. Or maybe one anecdotal comment you were talking about, like you had all these people and you're like, where are all the loads? This is weird. That's not that hard to do if it's just you and a couple of buddies. It's like, we get it. But to be able to socialize that across 25 people, it's like, hey, yeah, I know it's weird, but we're going to go do the thing. So that's just an interesting side note. So now you're in the top 100. How do you maintain? How do
yeah.
you look at, okay, we're going to get bigger and bigger, and hopefully nobody at FreightVana becomes, well, maybe hopefully, if it depends on your viewpoint, but what is your viewpoint on, okay, now FreightVana became corporate culture, and then someone from FreightVana starts, Tron freight trucking, and they come up with a new thing. Like, how do you view that? And what's your viewpoint on how to keep it not corporate
Yeah.
culture?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we overuse the term, but I think the leadership can really help set the culture. I'm very keenly aware of some things I learned. I think I always share with people from my 10 years inside corporate, you learn a lot. A lot of what you learn is what you don't want to do and don't
Yeah.
want to be. So you have the markers, truth be told, as a massive company. So like there's a big crevasse between where I sit today and something like that. But I still think there's markers in the steps, right? And so I'm aware. I think another thing that founders and or leaders fall into heavily would be from an ego perspective, right? It's about them and they took the risk and they're self-driven, which is great. And that's kind of where that ego plays. But I've seen a lot of founders like fall into this really tough spot where it does become about them, not about a bigger purpose. So I socialize, we have a video of our whys of why we're here. We sat around a table on day one and we shared those stories. I did a town hall with my team the other day and told them a little bit about my journey and like what drove me here. Some of the stuff I shared with you for the young ones that, they've been with me for 6 months. They have no clue. They're like, that dude sits in the corner and,
it's kind of weird.
Talks at his freaking computer all day. Like that dude. And he's
also,
old.
Are you standing? You're standing.
Yeah, I stand all day, every day, man.
You're a fitness guy. I get it. You got to be.
No, I wish I could tell you I was a fitness guy. I started standing 6 years ago, and literally, I just can't fathom sitting, especially at work, man. And where it really helps me, like you eat and then you sit back after a lunch. Like I just don't get that, and as I get older, it just feels healthy. All day, every day. It feels weird when I'm on an airplane. So it's like the longest I'll ever. Like it really hurts me on planes. But yeah, dude, I'm a standing all day, every day guy.
So you evangelize the culture. You continue to lead from the front. That's all fine and dandy. Then my last question for you, which doesn't have to end the episode, but it's the last question I can think of for now, is what's the hardest thing you went through so far? And whether that's a people thing or it's a culture thing or it's hey, the market almost got up to us, we didn't raise. What was the hardest thing? You don't have to give all the details, or if you want to, that'd be awesome. But what is the hardest situation you've gone through in the first 4.5 years?
I lead with one of the most eye-opening things of starting your own business, because you're running a big business, right? But you're really not running it root to fruit. You're running it in corporate America. Like you have all these systems and you have all this support and you have accountants and lawyers and
you're not cradle to grave in it, right?
Yeah, and I think that was just from I'll answer your question, but from my biggest takeaway was like I mentioned credit and wait, what do you mean we have credit? Like, well, how would you have credit? Like the guys were funny on the other line. They're like, well, dude, how would you have credit? You literally have a new entity and you've never done any work. You're like, oh yeah.
Don't you just trust me, bro?
I mean, I don't have industry cred. We could tap it too.
Yeah. What about $1 million? Just $1 million. Start me there.
Start me with something. Like, how do I get this blue check mark? What do I
with all the factoring companies for oh man.
Jesus, right? So that was those nuances. I think being the hardest thing is understanding that like as you start this thing, like everybody's going to have their own self ambitions too, right? We have founding members that are no longer here.
That's a tough.
There's always intra personnel, stuff that happens, and people make those choices, and so like, you really got to kind of embrace the fact, which is easy for me, honestly, as I like lean on things as I've kind of matured and grown so much here over the last 5 years. But you kind of lean on this fact that like, if it's not about you and it's about the team, then everything comes down to like, I'm here for them. And so like for me being such a team guy, like when I grew up playing hoops, man, I was all about being the point guard, not the scoring point guard, but I just wanted to win.
Yeah.
And if I had the ball, I was down to have the ball. I'm down to distribute. But like at the end of the day, when these games are over, like I want to win. And so I've kind of just carried that along with me, which I think has really suited us well. But the hardest part is just kind of dealing through all the churn and change of people and their seasons of their lives, and some of the drama that exists, and figuring out how to like still navigate both yourself emotionally and at the same time keep the business growing and thriving behind you. And you've got to like be able to do both, and that becomes an interesting trick that I didn't have to do much of the rest of my professional career.
People think of corporate America as people getting hired and getting fired and choosing new jobs as like a sports team, but a startup, no matter the size of it, whether it's a huge startup or a small one, it's almost like breaking up. It's like interpersonal relationships and drama and like real life stuff and people's family members, and like it gets that's the messiest part. And then kind of, to pull on that thread, you talked about like you just want to win and you care so much about the team. That actually played against you probably because you care so much. And then it's like, man, if I just didn't care, then it's just X's and O's and I could just operate and I don't feel bad. And I don't even get affected emotionally when someone who's a co-founder decides to leave, or, we have to fire someone that I'm friends with. But if you do care, which is the nature of why you started it, it becomes the hardest thing.
Yeah. 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 And I think the hardest thing, to your point, just to climb, I would have just, I've been doing this, you see the cycles, 2-year cycles, this, I mean, to build, but that's also part of the pride, like to be standing here talking to you today, the partnerships we have across the board, on the equipment side, on, the carrier side, on the shipper side. It's like, I'm blessed, man. I really, truly am blessed. And I think, I'll leave you with something, because you're not asking the question, but like part of this, why, I watched this crazy video that was a Denzel Washington. He did like this commencement speech, right? And he talked about.
Did you share this on LinkedIn? I think I watched it.
Maybe years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe years ago. I don't know if I ever put it out, but it was literally like he basically said like, it's kind of like life is short, but he didn't say life is short, because I think that just kind of is a throwaway comment. Yeah. He basically said like, many years from now, decades from now, when you're lying on your deathbed, around you will be the ghost of your unfulfilled potential, the opportunities you didn't take, the opportunities you squandered. And so basically like the whole premise of this thing is like no ghosts. And so like every decision you make. And so like when I had my job and I'd sit in my backyard and I'd look at the stars and I'm like, dude, you're really not, you got a 3 and 5-year-old, you got a nice house, your parents, like you're outperforming like all the things.
You made it. Yeah.
Effectively, like in a way you've made it, like you're really gonna push all in, start all from scratch to chase all these out. I'd stare in my backyard, sit in my backyard, I'd look at the stars, and this video was that thing. It was like, all of that is true, but if I didn't do this thing, those would be ghosts around my bed. And it literally sat with me to the point where I was like, I can't reconcile that. And so I felt like it called me to just continue on the path, eventually make the decisions that I made. It's a superpower while I'm here, because I don't forget, why I made those decisions, and some of the people, special people I shared with you, why I did it. So,
well, I think we'll round it off on that note, and I'll pare it down for if you're listening to this and you're thinking about starting a business, listen to the No Ghost Talk from Shannon, aka Denzel Washington. But for a broader audience, if you hate your job, get a new one. Don't work at a job you hate. I think that's like my only advice I've ever been able to give to even people at Rocket. I was like, if you hate this job, please don't do it, because what's the point of doing this if you're not having fun? And I think people even like, instead of taking the risk of starting a business, often people are like, I can't even risk not having a job or like not applying for other jobs. And that's like an American problem. So I appreciate the time, Shannon. Where do people find you? DMs on LinkedIn if they want to be like, hey, I heard you got a bunch of trailers and power only and you're pretty cool. Like, how do I work with you?
Yeah, man, I think LinkedIn's a spot for sure. DM me. You can find us at, FreightVana.io is our website. We just did that last year. Pretty proud of that. Kind of highlights our trailer pool, some of our ambitious growth, what we're building with the pool. And then we do traditional brokerage services, and interesting, like we have a non-commission structure, which I think is industry different for folks. And I think that's quite refreshing for some. So we're definitely doing some things here that are off the cuff, and I think against the grain, but typical in my publicly traded career, I think going against the grain's kind of always been the thing. And I kind of enjoy it. So.
Well, I appreciate it, Shannon, and I would encourage anybody who needs trailers to reach out to FreightVana right now, because that's a pretty interesting timing to have you on right now. So have a good day, man, and we'll see you next time.